Now that the eyes are mostly finished, we can move on to the skin. This is where the portrait really starts to feel alive. I'll show you how I choose the colors, build them in light layers, and blend softly so the skin looks smooth and natural. Just take your time with each step and trust the process. It all comes together beautifully at the end. If you want to follow along, there's a link below the video where you can download the reference photo. So I have the sepia, and I'm very carefully going to go over the side here because it's not really a line, but it's an edge. It's in shadow, so really light, and the nostrils really dark, and then here under the nose you see a shadow. The other nostril is a bit smaller. Now I'm going to use the sepia 50 and shade this shadow here. So it goes a bit down here towards the nostril, and then here next to the nose wing. And then here you see a shadow on the cheek, light. Here it's, on this side it's lighter, so just really light adding that. I see a shadow here on the nose wing. So I'm looking at all of the shadows I see. Okay, next, looking at which color I can use for the skin tone. I think I'm going to use the burnt ochre. First the middle burnt ochre, and then go over the sepia with it. This is burnt ochre 50, and then I'm going to see how that color turns out if it's not too orange brown. And then I'm going to go over it with another color. So layer by layer, just take your time. And I'm going to go over this whole nose wing with light pressure, light layer, because this nose wing is more in shadow, it's darker than the other side. And I'm coloring, until the highlights here over this shadow. And this highlight on the nose, I think here this small rectangle is the brightest. If you compare it to the white of the eyeball, you see that it's lighter. If you compare it to the small white highlights in the eye, it's not that bright. So maybe the buff titanium. And here, just a light. So I can use the burnt ochre 10 now. And then I can mix a layer of burnt sienna if this is too orange brown. I'm leaving that highlight on the nose and then really light layer. Let's see, with the burnt sienna, the middle one, burnt sienna 50. I want to go over the shadow here. It's not really purple brown, but I just want to add a bit more color to the shadow. Maybe here as well, because the shadow color and the shadow color is the same color. I'm using light pressure. And with the sepia 50, because it is a bit darker here, I'm using medium pressure. Darken this. The nostril is a bit darker, so I think I can go over it with the sepia. And with the burnt ochre 50, again darken the shadow a bit. Here you see the shadow and this shadow. Then in between it's just a bit lighter. So on this side it looks more pink brown. That's the burnt sienna color, burnt sienna 10. I'm using a bit more medium pressure, but more light to medium pressure. Going over the shadow area. So I have the burnt ochre here. Here you also see a shadow. So you see all of those beautiful shadows, midtones and highlights. Those are the values that will make your drawing look realistic. And if you go each section at a time and pay attention to the values on that section, that will make it a bit easier for you. I hope it will. So now I'm just focusing on the cheek. You see here in the middle a highlight. Then you see that it blends over to the midtone, and then it blends towards the shadow. So you don't want any harsh lines. So I'm using light pressure, blending towards the midtone, just like when you colored a sphere, remember? And you created all of these smooth edges, smooth transitions to make the sphere look round. Now with the burnt ochre 50 towards the midtone, but I do see that it's darker here. So first, actually, if I use the sepia, if I look at the shadow up here, you see that it's more brown and also a mix of raw umber. But here, so I'm looking at which colors I can mix, because the sepia brown is a bit gray brown. I don't want it to look too dull. You see that shadow on the neck, it does look, you see that color is desaturated a lot. I could use a sepia for that, for the neck. But the cheek has more color, so I don't want to desaturate the color too much, but I do want to darken it some more. So I think I can just mix the burnt sienna as well. Or yeah, mix it with the burnt ochre. So I'm going to add a layer with the burnt sienna now to darken the shadow. And let's see, here also a bit on the side. And then I can go over it with the burnt ochre so that it's darkened a bit and it's not that orange brown, because you can also add another layer with the burnt ochre or use a bit more pressure, but then it will just turn out, you see, this is the burnt ochre with, well, burnished layer. So you see how orange brown that is. That's not the color you want. If you put your swatches next to your reference photo, you can check it. This is just a bit too orange brown, so I want to mix it with the burnt sienna. And if these are your first drawings, then you don't have anything to compare it to. But if you put a date on the drawing in the back and you keep on going and you look back at your first drawings, that will help you motivate yourself to keep on going and to see any improvement. Okay, so I think this color is better. I also see this shadow here. Okay, so for the lips, it's pink, but not too saturated. I think I'm going to start with the burnt sienna, go over it with the pink, and then blend with the lighter burnt sienna. I think that will be a good color. So this is the burnt sienna, and you see that shadow? Really light. And now with the pink, I'm using medium pressure. And now darken for the shadow again with the burnt sienna. Or maybe, no, it's okay, can use this color, the burnt sienna for the shadow. And I have the ultramarine pink here. That's this one. I want to add a bit of that here to the shadow, see if that, and also go over the pink, see if that makes the color more like in the reference photo, light to medium pressure. Okay, now I will need to desaturate just a bit. So with the lightest burnt sienna 10, go over the whole lips using a bit more medium pressure, just blending all of the colors together. Here it's lighter. Here I left just the area for that highlight. Blend around it with the skin. And then I see on this lip, the left part, see that it's just a bit lighter. So now with the white, I want to use a lot of pressure and lighten up. And then here, so blend it all. Okay, now I'm not sure about the pink. I'm going to finish the rest of the skin around it, and then I can always come back. And I also see that I need to darken this shadow. You see the shadow coming from the finger on the lip. So then I will critique the lip color again. For now, I'm going to move on. I'm going to use the burnt ochre because I used the burnt sienna to darken. And now I want to blend with the burnt ochre again. And you see that this shadow color is the same. So I'm also going over this to blend it all at once. I'm using a bit more pressure, light to medium, not too much. I think I'm going to use the sepia now here for this dark shadow, and the sepia 50 to blend a bit up. And here I see that shadow, light pressure, don't want it too dark. And I'm checking to see, I think I can also darken here with the sepia, but I'm not sure. And you see that I have the white next to it, and you see actually in the reference photo how dark that value is on the neck. So once you add that, then you can critique the value of the cheek again. So you see what I mean, that the further you go and the more you finish of your drawing, it's easier to critique the values. So I'm going to move on to the mid-tone here, and that's with the burnt ochre 50. And if the skin tone is turning out too orange brown, you can always use the brown ochre, the more yellow brown color, if you need to. Okay, so now I'm using light pressure and shading towards the highlights. Light pressure because you don't want any edges. Here is already the highlight, so I think I'm already far enough. Blend over the shadow. So with light to medium pressure, I keep on going over it. Multiple layers instead of just one layer with more pressure. That's what I do. Okay, now with the burnt ochre 10, I'm using a bit more medium pressure now. And I'm starting to burnish this, but not with hard pressure, but more medium pressure. So I'm trying to get rid of the white of the paper now by pushing this pigment into the paper. Here I don't want it too dark, so I'm going to use light pressure. Just going to go over it. So I think I can use a lighter one to burnish here to make it more smooth, to make it smoother. I think I can darken the shadow a bit more here under the eye. Here, this shadow can also, maybe I can add the burnt sienna. This is the burnt sienna. So you can add a bit light pressure. If you want to add a color and blend a color, you use light pressure, light to medium pressure. But if you want to create a smoother layer, you can start to use more pressure. And with the burnt sienna 10, and I'm using a bit more medium pressure with this color, but I don't want to go too far here. So again, with the burnt ochre 10, continue here. And yeah, let's see. Now I don't want to burnish here yet because I'm not sure yet with the value of the neck. So I'm just going to go over the highlight here now. Light pressure. I think I can use the burnt sienna 10 here over the midtone. I'm using light pressure, light to medium. Really light pressure, just going over the whole highlights and here. Okay, I'm also going to move on to this cheek first. I'm going to, or actually, yeah, you see that this cheek is less orange brown, a bit more pink brown, but I am going to start with the burnt ochre, and I can just add less burnt ochre if I need to. And if you look at your drawing now at this stage from a distance, you see you can squint your eyes a bit and then look at the values. So it helps if you squint your eyes a bit because then you won't see any details, but just see like a blurry version of your drawing, and that will help if you just need to check the values. But then if you look close, you see that the layer isn't smooth enough yet. Now I want to use the buff titanium and go over this highlight and smoothen it, and also the rest around it. I'm using light to medium pressure, not too much, because I still want to compare the values. Let's see, I see that the shadow here on the eyes, I added some pink, but just under the eyes I see that it's just a bit darker, and I want to add, yeah, I want to add this pink color, or maybe the violet. No, I don't want it too dark. Just going to see how that looks first. So with the ultramarine pink is like a cooler pink because it leans more towards the purple, eventually towards the blue, because blue and red, you know, from the color wheel, in between blue and red is pink and purple. And the more blue, then you will have more violet color. And the more red, you will have a more pink, a more warm pink color, because red is warm and blue is cool. So if the pink leans towards the blue, then it's cool, and if the pink leans towards the red, it's warm. So I'm looking at the rest of the skin. If I see this color, more pink color, I'm just adding it under the eyes. And then now with the buff titanium, not with the white, because I don't want to brighten it too much. And if I want it a bit brighter, then I can use the white. Yeah, then I'm going to go over it with the white. So now I'm getting a smoother result, a smoother layer now, because I'm using more pressure. And here I see that I don't want to darken it, so I'm just going to also carefully blend over these layers. Push all that pigment into the paper to get rid of that white showing through, so you don't have a grainy pencil look. Okay, next I can critique that when I move on to the forehead. I'm going to move on to the forehead first, and I want to start with the shadow. So I think I can use the sepia, not the darkest one. I want to start with the middle one and then go over it with the raw umber. You see that for the shadow here on the left, and then I can critique my drawing and see if the other values, like here on the cheek and here on the eye, are correct. And then I can move on to the rest of the forehead. So I'm going to start, okay, so I'm going to shade a bit here for the shadow. So you see it goes up from the eyebrow, and you see here next to the eyebrow you see a darker shadow, and then it goes up to the left here, and then here also see a shadow. So this shadow and the highlight here, and then the shadow is not dark here, but you do see that it's a bit darker. That will make the forehead look a bit round. Above the eyebrow is the highlight, so the shadow goes up until around here. I'm looking at the space from the eye to the eyebrow, and then it's about the same here. It's not darker. So I'm going to move on to the darkest raw umber. I'm still using light pressure. And actually, before I can really compare values, I will still need to add that really dark value on the neck. And once you add that darkest value here on the neck, you see that this shadow doesn't look that dark anymore. This is the raw umber, so I want to go over this shadow. So the more darker, the more shadows I add, the more I see and notice that I can darken the rest or darken some more, because at first I just compare this to this side, for example, but now I add more shadow, and then I compare again, I look back, then I see that I can even darken some more. And I just do that, or I just see that by comparing. I compare the values in the reference photo, so I look at this dark shadow and then I see that this shadow is also almost as dark, so I see that I can darken it, and I think I can even darken this shadow just a bit. This is the raw umber, but I'm just using the light pressure, glazing this color. And also, if you're not sure about this value yet, you see that it, in the reference photo, you see it next to that dark shadow and the background, and in the drawing now, you just have it next to the white of the paper. So that's what makes it more difficult to compare, so we just need to keep on going. That's why I don't blend everything yet, because I'm not sure if I want to add another color or darken. So going here with that lighter, you see in between those two shadows, you see that the skin is a bit lighter, but not really bright like the highlight. Let's see, I can add a light layer here to the side. And then I think I can add a bit pink. If I look at the pink under the eyes, you see that? I think I'm going to add a bit pink here to the skin tone. But first, with the raw umber 50 now, go over the shadow and start to blend. I'm using light to medium pressure. And you see this highlight above it. Let's see, I'm going to use the raw umber 50 and this here, going around the edge of the shadow so that it will nicely blend in with the midtone later on, so that you don't have any edges. Here I do see a shadow, like maybe a blue color a bit from a vein here on the side of the forehead, so maybe I can add that. I'm just going to use one of these bright blues. So I have the gray blue here, and just really light pressure. Let's see, I have the eyebrow, then you have the hair, and then in the middle of that, just like that, really light. Just add a touch of blue. Don't see it anywhere else. So now with the raw umber 50, or maybe it will turn out too dark. It's actually really light here. So I'm going to use the pink now, anthraquinoid pink, and I want to use it now because I want to use the other layers to blend over it and to desaturate the pink a bit, because it's not very pink, but I do like to add a touch of pink because the skin tone can otherwise look too dull maybe. Here I also see the orange brown here, so I can add some more burnt ochre later. I also see a bit pink here, really light pressure. And before I blend, I see here I used a bit more pressure, so it's not really light, and you might see an edge. I want to blend it. I want to make sure that it's blended, so I just lighten it a bit with the pencil eraser. And now I'm going to color the whole forehead now with the lightest burnt ochre, and then maybe mix it with the burnt sienna, with the burnt ochre 10. And I'm also going to go over this area. I'm using medium pressure because I have more layers here. And if I need to darken some more, I see I can use the sepia, I think, because now my shadow looks a bit gray because of the raw umber, so I want to make it look a bit more brown like I see in the reference photo. Or maybe I can add a bit burnt ochre, the darkest one, a bit more orange brown to make the color look warmer. Light pressure here to blend, and let's see, this highlight here, can I use, oh, we can go over this highlight here, it's not too bright. Blend over the pink here. I think because the colors look now very saturated, so I think I'm going to use the lightest raw umber to go over these layers and blend. And you see that this is a large area now, so take your time, make sure that you keep on using light pressure because these are the first layers here. And then let's just see how this blue blends in. Just really subtle. You don't want to add like a lot of blue that it looks like a bruise. And you want to add it really lightly and blend over it with another color. So I'm just going to blend the midtone here some more, and over the hairline here, because in between the hairs you see the skin tone. And every time you step away and you take a short break, you see that the more you continue, the more it all comes together and the better it will look. Sometimes it's hard to look past the first layers and the unblended look. So I know some might want to blend or burnish right away to get a smoother look, because now it looks a bit grainy and you still see some of the white of the paper showing through in some areas. So some just want to burnish that right away to have a more finished look. But I think it's more important to keep on layering with light layers and weights and try to look past that grainy look. Look at the values, try to squint your eyes when you look at your drawing and look at the values. Don't think about the details and the end result yet. All of these in-between layers are important as well. So this is how I color with colored pencils, and I go step by step and continue to layer. But eventually, if you find your own technique, or if you think something else works easier for you, so maybe you do want to burnish earlier, you don't add as much layers, you don't have to. You can see what works best for you and what you prefer, which technique you prefer, as long as you're satisfied with your end results. These are all practices, and eventually if you find another technique or a certain way, if you like to burnish earlier, or I don't know, maybe you're using another kind of paper that works better for you. These are all practices, and then you can, of course, you're the artist, you can decide, and you also might have your own preference. We all have our own taste or thoughts about things. So you don't have to draw or color everything the same. There isn't really a right or wrong. I'm not saying that my way is the best way and the right way and the only way. This is how I do it. I want to show you how I'm going to move on to the burnt sienna 10. I want to show you how I layer and build up all of these layers, blend, how I look at color, and what my thoughts are when I look at the reference photo, how I critique my drawing. I just want to show you my process and share my thoughts with you so that you can learn from it. But I would never say that this is the right way or the only way. We all have our own preferences, so it's up to you. And I just want you to learn something from this. So when you critique your own drawing, all of our drawings will look a bit different because we are all different artists. So you will try to be realistic when you critique your own drawing and don't compare it too much to others. That's also one thing important, that you don't compare your drawings too much to others. The main reason is because you don't know for how long others are already practicing or drawing. So you don't want to compare your beginning of the journey to someone's middle of the journey and they have been practicing for a longer time. You try not to get discouraged when you look at others, because if you go online, you can see so many different artists, different kinds of art. Some you like, some you don't. Some techniques I see of others, I think, oh, that's really beautiful, but not really my style, or not really something I wish to do. And sometimes I see that and think, oh, I wish I could draw or paint that myself, because that's really beautiful. We all need to, we're all artists, so we're all on the same journey. So I'm going over the mid-tone here of the forehead, and now because the forehead isn't really that warm, so blending it with the burnt sienna 10 looks better. I think I'm not going to go over it with the buff titanium, because the buff titanium is like a cream color. It's like an off-white, but maybe too warm here for the forehead. I see that it's starting to look too warm, so I think I'm just going to go over it with the white. Still the burnt sienna. So here next to that blue, you see that it's a bit lighter here. Here it's lighter. Just going to very gently make sure that I don't have any edges. Now I'm going to use the darkest burnt ochre and add a bit of that warmth that I see in the reference photo. Burnt ochre. And if you're new to drawing people portraits, maybe you're used to drawing animal portraits, or no portraits at all. Drawing people portraits is one of the most difficult subjects. It really is. Drawing like a dog or a cat, it's more forgiving. So be proud of yourself, because it isn't easy. Light pressure, you don't want to darken too much and then think, oh, oops, it turned out too dark. Darken gradually. That way you can stop when you need to. That's why I like to layer and layer and layer. So I critique after each layer. And it might be a slower process to go slow and darken in layers and critique, lighten, darken if you need to, but it's what works for me. And I think it's better than that you darken right away and then when you're almost finished you notice and you need to correct. So how do you say that? Better safe than sorry. I like to just be careful and go step by step, and I don't like to rush, because I know that I will see that in the end result, and then I would feel like, I should have taken more time or put in more time and not rushed those last layers or those in-between layers. So taking your time is also a good thing to learn, having patience when drawing, because that's important. You can't just finish something in 1 hour. And my drawings don't even take a lot of time, When I said before, some artists put in even more hours, so that's a lot of patience and dedication and motivation. You also need motivation to finish, because if you're not feeling it anymore, then you don't feel like finishing. So those are all some habits you will need to develop, or motivation. You'll need to be determined, have patience, be willing to practice. And if you don't have that and you see that others are improving and they keep on going, and then you wonder, how are they doing that? Well, it's just because they kept on going. They kept on practice, they kept on putting in those hours, they kept on making mistakes, they kept on learning from them, they just kept on going. When you stopped, they kept on going. And there's nothing wrong with stopping or taking a break for a while. If you love drawing, then you will eventually need to come back to it. That's the only way you will need to, or that's the only way you will be able to improve. So taking a break for a while, or if you're just not feeling it anymore, just take your break for how long you need. Now you see that the skin isn't looking smooth at all, but I'm looking at the values now. I think the shadow is dark enough, and the eyebrow isn't finished yet. See, I want to blend first before I add some more of those eyebrow hairs. Here, I'm going to use the burnt ochre 50. Go over this area, that just a bit of a shadow here. And then with the raw umber 10, let's see how that's going to use the light pressure to see how that will start to look, that color. Maybe the colors will get too desaturated too much, so I'm going to start light. Okay, I'm not going to use more pressure there, otherwise I will lighten the shadow too much. I'm going to go over this because I can desaturate the color a bit more using light to medium pressure, and also here, also to desaturate the color a bit and blend it. I think I can. This is too bright here, so yeah, maybe just with the raw umber 10, really light. You see, this is just a neutral color. So if the white is too bright and the buff titanium too light, then you can just use the raw umber 10 to blend and to burnish. But I'm not burnishing yet, I'm using light pressure here. Consistent pressure going around this highlight above the eyebrow. And the more I finish of my drawing, the more excited I get to finish. So in the beginning, I might have to push myself because I take a lot of breaks, and then in the beginning stages I might need to push myself more. Okay, I'm just going to sit down, or I tell myself I'm just going to sit down for maybe 10 minutes to a half an hour and just see what I can get done in that time. And then the more I finish, I do feel like drawing and finishing it. So I do want to continue more and more and get more excited to finish it than in the beginning, because I know that it will still take a lot of time. So that's why I try to break the drawing time and draw multiple times instead of a lot at once. That will also help that you don't rush. I have a sharper pencil tip, so I'm really gently trying to push all of the pigment into the white of the paper. So with light to medium pressure, I'm starting to smoothen this layer, but not by using really hard pressure. I'm burnishing the whole layer, but gently pushing all of the pigment and trying to get rid of that grainy look. So I'm using like medium pressure, but I also see that it's turning out darker, and here that's okay for the shadow, but I don't want to continue that on the whole forehead. So I'm just going to go over the midtones that I see that I can darken just a bit, or that it's okay. And now light pressure again. So yeah, to blend the edges. Here I think I'm just going to use the lighter sepia maybe. Otherwise it will turn out too pink if I use more pressure. Here I can, so I'm going to slowly use medium pressure here and create a smoother look. And here I can also, so I keep on looking back at my reference photo to check if it's not too dark. So here I'm going to also go over the eyebrow. So I keep on switching from light pressure to medium pressure. Each area here is a highlight, so don't want to darken there. So here I'm using more pressure, blending this all, smoothing the layer. Light pressure when I go towards the midtone, and then here medium pressure again. And I will be able to darken here if I need to. So now you see that the layers are starting to look smoother, but I'm not going over the highlights because the burnt sienna 10 will be too dark for that. So I'm using a bit less pressure when I burnish here. And I can go over this area. Here I see a shadow. I'm going to darken just a bit here. I see, yeah, if you look at this nose wing here, and see a small shadow there with the sepia 50. I'm going to add that shadow here. Also see a shadow. And here above the nostril. And now with the burnt ochre 50 to make the shadow look a bit warmer and blend. Also here, add a bit orange brown. And then with the burnt sienna 10 again to blend. Light to medium pressure, some areas medium pressure, but try not to create any edges. Keep on looking at what you see. I'm looking at the shadows on the nose and creating that on my drawing. Raw umber 10 and blend over. I see that it's turning out too light, so first with the raw umber 50, see if that won't. I'm using medium pressure. I want to blend near the edges a bit darker. So I'm just going over it a bit. Because I went over this with the burnt sienna 10, got all smoother, but maybe just a bit too light, so just adding back some more color or darken it a bit more. And the raw umber 10, I'm using medium pressure now to burnish and smoothen. And I see that later I will add some hair, some texture. You see that in the reference photo. And now looks too gray. So I think I'm going to add the brown ochre. This is brown ochre 50. Add some more color back. Also here to the other shadow. Maybe also go over this area here. And with the burnt ochre, again, with the burnt ochre, that warm brown. So now I'm looking at the highlights and blend the highlights. So this is the white pencil, blend it, but not use too much pressure because you can lighten the whole area too much. So you see you can use white as a blender, but I only do that when I blend the highlights because you don't want to go over the shadows. It will completely lighten. So next to the highlights, I'll also blend the midtone to create a smooth transition. And the areas I see it's okay that if it lightens a bit. Here I don't want to go over the blue with the white because it can really lighten and brighten that blue color. And then also go over the highlight here. Using medium pressure and keep on looking back at the reference photo to see if I can get lighter here or not. And now remember, because you're focusing on the forehead now, but once you move on to the hair and you finish the hair, then you won't focus on the forehead. So I'm gently going over the whole forehead here to smoothen it all and blending it all with each other. If you want to follow the rest of the portrait with me, the full real-time version of this portrait drawing is available inside the membership, where you get access to all my portrait lessons and step-by-step courses. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.